My manager told me not to come to the meeting about an hour before it started. "Don't bother coming to this one," he said like he was doing me a favor. "We need senior presence in the room. I'll handle it. You just make sure the deck is perfect." By the time that meeting was halfway through, I was sitting in a cheap cafe across the street from our office, sipping burnt coffee while my phone lit up on the table. One call, 5:12. By the time the cup was empty, the screen showed 110 missed calls. I didn't answer a single one. People think that kind of moment happens out of nowhere, like someone just snaps and decides to blow up their life. It never works like that. It's slow. It's months of tiny cuts until one more "don't bother" lands in the wrong spot. I work as a project analyst for a mid-sized software company. Translation: I do the numbers, the timelines, and the reports my manager pretends he wrote. His name is Jared, mid-40s, shiny watch, shinier teeth, one of those guys who thrives in open-plan offices because there are more people to perform for. For a long time, I thought he just pushed me because he believed in me. That's how he sold it anyway. "I lean on you because you're solid, man," he'd say, dropping a spreadsheet on my desk at 6:02 p.m. "You're the only one I trust with this stuff." Then he'd CC the VP on my work and phrase it like he'd spent all night on it. I let it slide. Rent is expensive, and my threshold for conflict used to be a lot higher than my threshold for unemployment. The big client was a telecom company we'd been chasing for almost a year. Multi-million contract, potential case study, the kind of logo they put on the front page of the website. I'd been living inside their data for 3 months. Late nights, early mornings, correcting numbers that marketing rounded up without telling anyone. Last week, Jared started circling my desk like a shark. "You know how big this is, right?" he said, fingers drumming on my monitor. "If this goes well, it's career-defining. For both of us." For both of us. He said it like we were a team. But when the first internal prep meeting invite went out, my name wasn't on it. I only saw it because one of the junior PMs screenshotted it and sent it to me with, "Did they forget you?" I forwarded it to Jared. No subject, no comment. 30 seconds later, he walked over. "Yeah, so," he started, lowering his voice like he was about to share a secret. "Those are just high-level touch points. No need to drag everyone in. You'll be at the main client session on Thursday." I nodded. Fine. Whatever. I went back to cleaning up the churn forecast the sales guy had massaged into fantasy. The night before the main meeting, I was still at my desk at 8:45 p.m. Half of the office dark. Jared leaned on the cube wall, jacket over his arm. "You almost done?" he asked. "Running the last scenario," I said. "I'll send the final deck in about 20. He smiled. "That's why I trust you. You always pull through." I sent the deck. All 28 slides with notes, backup numbers, alternate scenarios. I double-checked the formulas, then went home, mind already rehearsing how I was going to walk the client through the risk model. I didn't sleep well. Story of the past 3 months. I woke up 30 minutes before my alarm, stared at the ceiling, and tried to remember what a normal heart rate felt like. Shower, shirt, tie. I even ironed it, which I never do. At 8:12 a.m., as I was locking my front door, my phone buzzed. Jared. "Morning," I answered, juggling my bag and keys. "Hey," he said, too cheerful. "Quick thing." My stomach tightened. "What's up?" "So I talked to leadership last night," he said. "They want this to look streamlined. No crowd. Just me and Mike in the room with them." "Okay," I said slowly. "Don't take it personally." He added immediately, which is what people always say right before they make it personal. "You're the brains on this, obviously, but we don't want to confuse them with too many voices. You understand?" I stood there in the hallway, staring at my own feet. "So I'm not going?" "Not this one," he said. "You've done the heavy lifting. Let me carry it across the finish line. Take the morning. Breathe. You've earned it. Don't bother coming to the meeting. I'll ping you if we need anything." He laughed like it was a joke. I didn't. "Right," I said. "Sure." "Attaboy," he replied, and hung up before I could think of anything else to say. I walked to the bus stop anyway on autopilot. Habit is strong. Halfway there, I stopped. It wasn't that I expected him to be different. It was that some stupid part of me had still been picturing myself in that room, talking through the model I'd built, answering questions, not just existing as a name on the cover slide under his. The bus pulled up. I didn't get on. There's a cafe on the corner opposite our building. We joke about it in the office. $9 coffee and Wi-Fi that barely works. It opens at 8:30. I'd only ever been there once when we had a fire drill in January. I crossed the street and went inside. The barista looked like she hadn't finished waking up yet. I ordered a black coffee because my hands were already shaking and adding sugar felt like a bad idea. I took a seat near the window where I could see the glass front of our office building and, if I leaned a bit, the conference room on the second floor where they'd booked the big meeting. I set my phone on the table face up. No reason, just habit. There's a particular kind of anger that isn't loud. It doesn't even feel hot. It feels like someone turned the volume down on everything. The music in the cafe was just a murmur. The chatter behind me might as well have been in another language. All I could hear was Jared's voice in my head. Don't bother coming. I'd eaten his little dismissals for years, being talked over in front of clients, being told to clean up the numbers when what he meant was make them look better, taking the late-night calls because he'd promised impossible deadlines and then vanished at 5. I swallowed it because that's what you do when you're the solid one. I took a sip of coffee. It was awful. At 9:01, my calendar notification popped up. Telecom Q2 Strategy, main session. Location, boardroom, A. Attendees, Jared, VP Sales, CTO, client delegation. I wasn't on the list. I watched 3 suits I didn't recognize walk into the building. One of them pointed at something on his phone. The others laughed. A minute later, Jared appeared in the lobby, all pressed shirt and easy charm, shaking hands like he hadn't called me less than an hour ago to tell me I was unnecessary. He didn't look up at the cafe windows. He never looks up. I turned my phone face down and wrapped my hands around the cup, letting the heat soak into my fingers. For the first time in a long time, I had nothing to do. No spreadsheet to fix, no slide to adjust. Just space. I should have felt useless. Instead, I felt something click into place, quiet and clean. At 9:27, the phone buzzed once on the wood. I ignored it. At 9:29, it buzzed again. Then again. I flipped it over. One missed call from an internal number I didn't recognize. One from Jared, one from reception. I watched the screen go dark, then light up again. Another call. Another. The little red counter started to climb. By 9:35, I had 12 missed calls. By 9:40, I stopped counting out loud and just watched the number creep up in the corner of the screen while the coffee cooled in my hands. Something was happening upstairs. I didn't know what yet. I just knew one thing with absolute clarity. For once, I wasn't going to run in and fix it for them. By the 10th minute, I understood one thing. When someone is calling that many times, it doesn't mean something is just off schedule. It means everything they built is balanced on an edge and starting to fall. At 9:46, my screen lit up again. This time it was a message from a colleague in analytics. "Are you close? They asked for you." A second later, another message. "Jared said you were running late. Client wants the author of the model." The author? Interesting how quickly he had to reach for that phrase once it became clear that the numbers he'd been parading for weeks were collapsing right in front of the client. I took a sip of my cold coffee and looked toward the office entrance. Outside, people moved as usual, headphones in, folders under arms, coffee cups in hand. No one knew that in one of the conference rooms a fire had already started, a fire I'd spent years putting out with my time, my nerves, and my goodwill. My phone vibrated again, an email notification. From Jared's subject, urgent. "Where are you? They're asking questions only you can answer. Get up here now." I didn't reply. I just locked my screen, but irritation still crept in. Not because he lied about me being late. That was predictable. It was because he invented the story instantly, without the slightest hesitation, as if it were a rehearsed line. I pictured him standing by the whiteboard, smiling at the clients, saying something like, "He should be here any minute. He's usually very reliable." And at the same time, furiously dialing my number under the table. By 10:01, I had 37 missed calls. What I felt wasn't anger. Not really. Not even pain. It was the familiar, sinking realization. Once again, I was being turned into the insurance policy. The person rolled out when things fail and blamed when things crash. I replayed all the moments when Jared had wriggled out of trouble at my expense. Every time he wrapped it in the same phrases. It's just business. Nothing personal. That's what teamwork is. Everyone pulls their weight. He was always happy to let me pull the weight, especially when he needed to sign off on reports where my name quietly vanished. At 10:05, I finally saw the message that put everything into place. The client says the churn forecast doesn't match the underlying data. They want the raw sheets. Jared said you compiled them. Please respond. 1 second, 2 seconds, and then the realization hit. Raw data. The files Jared had asked me to adjust a week earlier. The files I'd refused to alter and saved into a protected folder so the original dataset remained intact. The files sitting on the server under my name, with timestamps attached. The numbers I knew by heart, every formula, every percentage, every timeline. If the client was now requesting the raw data, while Jared had been showing the edited version, then his little performance had ended much sooner than he expected. I opened my laptop. For a moment, I wondered if I should intervene at all. Maybe just let the storm pass on its own. Then another message appeared, from an analyst who normally avoided any conflict. They're blaming the discrepancy on you. Jared said you overrode his corrections, and now the numbers don't reconcile. The VP looks furious, not sure what's happening. That hurt more than I thought it would. Not because he lied, but because he lied without hesitation. It wasn't an accident. It was instinct, a habit, a reflex. I looked at the building in front of me, the second-floor windows, silhouettes moving behind the glass. I imagined Jared saying something like, "I trusted him with the model. I didn't realize he changed assumptions. We're trying to fix it." And in that moment, irritation gave way to something else, pure, cold clarity. I opened the protected folder, the one holding the untouched datasets, complete with timestamps, metadata, and revision logs. No one could fake them. No one but me even knew I'd preserved the version with restricted access. This wasn't a revenge plot. I hadn't spent nights fantasizing about his downfall. I had simply protected my work, because I knew exactly who Jared was long before I stopped pretending otherwise. At 10:12, my phone rang, a familiar number, the analyst who never called me directly. I didn't answer, but I read his text. They paused the meeting. "VP wants to know if you're sending the correct dataset. They said they won't proceed until they see your numbers." There it was, the turning point. For the first time in a long while, the situation didn't depend on Jared, or on how fast I could rush in, burn out, and rescue the room yet again. It depended on something much simpler. The truth has a way of surfacing, especially when someone tries to drown it with someone else's hands. I typed a short email. Attached. Original dataset used for initial projections. No alterations. Logged and timestamped. Sent from my personal workspace. I didn't need to go upstairs. I didn't need to stand beside him at the board while he shifted blame onto me. I didn't need to explain what was already obvious. I pressed send. Within a minute, silence arrived. The phone stopped vibrating. Messages stopped coming. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. What had happened before. All of it had merely been the prelude to the real collapse. Because when everything goes quiet like that, it never means the problem is resolved. It means it has just become far, far worse. The silence didn't last. It never does. It just thickened, like the air before a storm breaks. At 10:19, the first call came from an internal extension I didn't recognize. Then another, then two at once. By 10:25, the counter jumped past 60. Jared wasn't calling anymore, which meant someone higher up had stepped in. He had moved from "fix this for me" to "cover me," and when that stopped working, he had run out of rope. I watched the second-floor conference room. People moved fast now, the kind of fast that happens when money is at risk and someone's story isn't adding up. I could see the VP pacing near the wall-to-wall glass, hand pressed to his forehead. Two of the clients were standing, arms crossed, staring at the screen. The meeting wasn't a meeting anymore. It was an autopsy, and Jared was the one on the table. My phone buzzed again, a message from the junior analyst. "VP wants you in the room. Jared said you left suddenly and took the raw files with you." That was bold, even for him. But that was also when something inside me finally shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger needs heat. This felt colder, cleaner, like I was finally standing on the outside of a machine I'd been trapped in for years, watching it malfunction. I typed back, "Files were never removed, logged and available. Sent to VP already." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then nothing. Inside the building, the CTO leaned forward, speaking sharply. One of the client delegates slammed a pen down. Jared looked smaller with every minute, shoulders tight, hands fluttering uselessly as he talked. I knew that posture. The "I can explain" posture. The "please let the room reset" posture. And then the micro-hook happened naturally. Every person in that room suddenly stopped moving at the same time. The VP held up a hand. Someone pointed at the screen. Another shook their head slowly. Whatever they were seeing, it wasn't something Jared could spin. My phone lit up from VP. "Come upstairs. Now." I stared at the message for a full 10 seconds, letting the weight of it settle. Then for the first time that day, I stood up. Not fast, not dramatic, just deliberate. I left a tip on the table, pulled on my jacket, and crossed the street. The glass doors hissed open, and the receptionist looked at me with that tight, worried expression people get when they're not sure if the building is on fire or if the fire is sitting calmly at their desk. "Second floor," she said quietly. I nodded. When the elevator doors opened onto the executive hallway, the sound hit me first. Not shouting, but the brittle, strained voices of people trying very hard not to shout. The conference room door was half open. I stepped inside. Every head turned. Jared's face went pale, then red, then some uneven mixture of both. "Where have you been?" he snapped. Too quickly, too loudly. "We've been trying to reach—" The VP cut him off. "Sit down, Jared." Jared froze. The VP's turned to me. "We reviewed the dataset you sent." I nodded once. "It matches the initial projections," he continued. "The numbers presented in this meeting do not." "That's because he—" Jared began, pointing at me like a drowning man reaching for anything that floats. But the CTO shook his head. "Stop. We checked the logs." That was it. The moment. The miniature collapsed before the bigger one. I didn't smile. Didn't shift my weight. Didn't give the room anything to read. I simply waited as the VP pulled up the internal audit trail. Timestamps, version archives, the edits Jared had made personally while insisting I had altered assumptions. Jared's mouth opened once, then again. No words came out. The client delegate leaned forward. "So the projections we saw were manipulated?" "Adjusted," Jared whispered. "Without disclosure," the VP clarified. Jared swallowed. It was for clarity. But the client cut him off. Clarity isn't deceit, and deceit isn't clarity. The air in the room changed. Not loudly, just a soft internal shift, like the moment before a verdict is spoken. The VP turned to me again. "Thank you for sending the correct data. We'll continue the meeting in a smaller group. You're staying. Jared, step outside." If vengeance had a sound, it would be that sentence spoken in that exact tone. Jared didn't move at first. He looked at me, searching my face for some sign that I would intervene, that I would save him the way I had saved him a dozen times before. But I didn't move either. He finally stood, slowly, then backed out of the room, his expensive shoes silent on the carpet. The door closed behind him, and something inside me settled. Not triumph, not gloating, just the quiet sense that a line I'd been too tired to draw had finally drawn itself. But that wasn't the end, not even close. Jared didn't go far. I saw him through the glass wall, shoulders tight, eyes darting, pacing the hallway like a man searching for an exit that didn't exist. Every now and then he'd stop, flatten his tie, straighten his jaw, as if dignity could be reattached by hand. But in the conference room, everything was calm. The VP dismissed half the group, lowered the blinds halfway, and shifted into what the company called recovery mode. That's when the performance stopped, and the truth did the talking. We walked through every slide, every assumption, every line item I had built from scratch. I answered their questions, not defensively, not arrogantly, just plainly. Numbers don't need emotion. They behave the same whether you're proud or ashamed of them. And with every explanation I gave, the tension in the room thinned. The client leaned back in his chair, hands folded. "This is what we expected to see initially," he said. The corrected version made no logical sense. The VP nodded. "We'll issue a revised pack today, and you," he added, looking at me, not Jared, "will lead that effort." Something in my chest loosened. Not joy, something older. Relief. Not the kind that comes from winning, but the kind that comes from finally dropping a weight you've carried long enough to forget it wasn't part of your spine. When the meeting ended, the VP asked me to stay behind. The door clicked shut. "You've been carrying this team," he said, quietly. I should have noticed sooner. I didn't say anything, not out of strategy. I simply had nothing to add. He continued, "We'll be initiating the performance review on Jared immediately. There will likely be a transition. If that occurs, I want you to step into an expanded role." I nodded once. "Understood." "You handled yourself well today," he said. "Professionally." That mattered more to me than the promotion. I left the room with a quiet pulse in my chest, steady and even. As I stepped into the hallway, Jared was waiting. Or rather, he was standing there as if waiting for someone to save him. His eyes snapped to me. "You blindsided me," he hissed under his breath. "Why didn't you come when I called?" "You told me not to come," I answered. "That was before." He stopped, swallowed. "Look, we can fix this. You just need to explain." But I shook my head. "There's nothing to explain." He stared as if I'd spoken in a language he didn't understand. "You let me drown in there." "No," I said calmly. "You jumped. I just stopped holding the rope." For a moment he looked like he might shout, but something in my expression must have told him that would be pointless. He deflated. His voice shrank. "I need this job." "So did I said, "and you made that a lot harder." He opened his mouth, then closed it. When he finally walked away, his shoes didn't sound confident or expensive anymore. Just tired. I went back to my desk. People glanced at me, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with something like respect. The kind they reserve for someone who's been in a storm and come out carrying his own calm. By late afternoon, the updated deck was finished. Clean, precise, transparent. I sent it to the VP, CC'd the clients, logged the version, and closed my laptop. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, the office felt breathable. I stepped outside. The sun had shifted, warming the sidewalk. The cafe across the street was still open. I thought about the cold coffee I'd had that morning, the quiet that had felt like the end of something. Now it felt like the beginning. My phone buzzed once. A single text from an unknown number. "We need to talk, please." I blocked it without replying. Some endings need silence. Some lessons need consequences. I walked toward the parking garage, feeling the rhythm of the day settle in my bones. Not triumph, not revenge, just balance. A life returning to its proper shape. At the top level, my car sat alone in the soft light. The city hummed below. I unlocked the door, got in, and sat for a moment with my hands on the wheel. No shaking, no dread, just quiet. Peace isn't something dramatic. It doesn't arrive with fanfare or fireworks. It comes like this: steadily, sensibly, when you finally stop carrying what was never yours to begin with. I started the engine, drove home, and for the first time in a long time, the silence waiting for me wasn't heavy. It was mine.